Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, along with my co-host, Ed Carbajal, and on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. Ed, you survived the hurricane scare. How's it going, man?
That's all right. We're a little wet out here, but I mean, it's a good day for me. I get to talk to my homeboy that's been in the game with me for a while, Daniel Zaldivar. I don't know how many projects he's got going. Z Boxing News, his latest ventures, the Last Round podcast. Que pasa? What's up, man?
Well, I'm not in a hurricane over here in Los Angeles, I can tell you that. So, we're pretty dry over here. I think it was, 87 degrees today over here in Southern California, the LA area. So, I feel for you, man, over there, that rain and that hurricane. But,
You
yeah,
don't
like you
feel
said,
for me, dude. You never feel for me. You always rub your nice weather in.
but like you said, yeah, we go back quite a few years. Of course, you're the MMA guy, and then I'm the boxing guy. So
Yeah.
whenever we need information from each other, we hit each other up.
Yeah.
And we're still here, still
Yeah.
surviving.
Just some background for folks that are listening and watching and stuff. So me and Danny go way back. We actually started this whole covering combat sports together. What was it, 2014?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So we go back a few years, and we worked at this now defunct site called Page Two Sports. But pretty much Daniel, myself, and Amy Kaplan, that's over at Fansided now, built the Fight Night channel over there, and it was just literally us doing. Amy was doing both, and I was doing MMA, and Daniel was the main boxing guy. And if you haven't read any of his stuff, I share it a lot on Twitter. I mean, he writes at Under the Hand Wraps now, and
Right.
and then he just started this podcast with his buddy Michael Shepard, The Last Round. So
Yeah, and he's from England, so
yeah.
it's a Mexican American, and an English guy who now lives in Southern California. So it's a pretty interesting spin on the boxing game. So
Yeah.
if you get a chance, listen to it.
So you guys, I know both Matt and I actually didn't get to watch Canelo and Triple G. I listened to your first episode where you guys talked about it, but I know you and Matt watched Canelo and Triple G. I only saw the highlights and the results afterwards. But I mean, please fill me in. What happened on Saturday?
Well, we got a better fight than we did last year. But of course, there's always going to be people who cry robbery, or you know, especially when there's a lot of casual fans watching.
Yeah.
You're going to get a lot more of the negative feedback. But to go to the final outcome, Canelo Alvarez defeated Triple G Gennady Golovkin by majority decision. So, I mean, I know you know what majority decision is. MMA guys have the same thing. But
Yeah.
for everybody out there, one of the cards was a draw, 114-114, and the other ones were 115-113 in favor of Saul Canelo Alvarez, who ended up taking Gennady Golovkin's middleweight titles, the WBA world title, the WBC world title, and there is another world title that was up for grabs, but Canelo chose not to pay the sanctioning fee for that belt because it's not really like a respected sanctioning body. This isn't like in your guys' world, the MMA world, UFC, Bellator, where it's all one body owns every single belt. Over here in boxing, there's a bunch of different sanctioning bodies who have their own respective world titles. So at the moment, Canelo Alvarez is the current WBA middleweight world champion and the WBC middleweight world champion. And it was a great fight. It was a great fight if you got to watch it. They both, they blood, sweat, and tears in the ring. The reason why I thought Canelo probably won it, and because he got the nod, is because he was chasing Gennady Golovkin for most of the fight, probably the first 7 rounds, and that was a big criticism that he got last year, was that he was fighting off his back foot. Even though last year he was just counterpunching. He's always been a counterpuncher. So, if you're a student of the game, if you're an actual fan, then you can see what he did last year. I mean, it just depends on what type of style you like. But he's a counterpuncher. So, if you knew what type of fighter he was, that's how he fought. And this year, before this fight, he was getting criticized. Oh, he's going to run again. He's going to run again. Well, for a majority of the fight, like about 7 rounds, he was the aggressor. He was chasing Triple G, and nobody's ever chased Triple G. And honestly, I think that's what won him the fight, even though it was extremely, extremely close. I mean, I know you say you didn't watch it, but I mean, what have you heard over there on the East Coast? From have you talked to anybody at work or any colleagues in terms of
Dude,
the fight? What they think?
I was in my hometown. I had to rush back to my hometown. I was actually my Saturday night. I was helping support a friend in a grappling tournament, and then I had to leave that because I had a family emergency at home. So I was in my hometown, and outside of the screaming and the yelling and the noises, I thought the lawlessness was going on in my hometown because it's the Latinos and the Mexicans were all happy. We're all happy with what happened. So I had to, of course, I had to refer to Twitter to find out about the controversial decisions. I mean, people were talking about the Mexican judges with the Mexican holiday, and I was just like, okay. I mean, I'm like in my mind, I was like, can we not have a big boxing card that doesn't end with this type of chatter on the internet afterwards? Because it seems like that it always happened the last time. It's happening this time, and then I'm just like, all right. I'm like this seems par for the course. But I mean, the consensus of like media folk that I talk to, everyone seems to side with the Triple G winning. And I mean, but the highlights that I saw show Canelo doing. The highlights I saw showed Canelo doing well, but I didn't see him attacking. All the highlights was him doing the Matrix, like bullet dodge off of
Right.
Triple G's attack. So in my mind, I was like, all right, well, that's not really aggressive. He's not scoring any significant strikes, and he's not being aggressive. So I could see how that would score against him, but that's still pretty dope, So I was
Right.
just that's where I was. That's where I was. But again, like I was like, let me. That's why I reached out to you because I was like, let me reach out to my man because I got to get the real off this. You know what I
Well,
mean?
let me kind of give you an inside scoop, and of course I go more in detail. If you want to hear a big detailed explanation for like about 45 minutes between myself and my co-host Michael Shepard over here in Southern California. Our second episode of the Last Round podcast actually just dropped last night. It's on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, Audio Boom, all the major ones. So if you want to listen to it, we dive deep into that fight, and we analyze it. But the reason why I think Canelo won the fight, of course, he was the aggressor for a majority of the fight, about 7 rounds. But it also depends on how you score a fight, especially in boxing. I mean, I know you guys can shed some more light on MMA and MMA judges and what exactly they look for and stuff. I mean, I have a general idea, but of course, I defer to you guys on that. But in terms of boxing, when you're a judge, or even just a fan, how you're judging the fight, but especially a judge, some of them are going to judge based on, okay, is this guy landing more jabs, or will they give you the round just because of you touching your opponent? Your punches might not be significant with aggression that had an effectiveness behind it, but you're statistically winning that round because you landed more punches. Or are you judging based on the effectiveness of your punches? The power punches. I think the CompuBox statistics following the fight was that Canelo Alvarez landed 145 power punches, and Gennady Golovkin landed, I think, like between 105 and like 110. So they were hand in hand, but Canelo's shots throughout the fight were more deafening. They were showcased more. But Gennady Golovkin landed more jabs. He outlanded Canelo in the jab category like 3-1. So and if you're a student of the game, like I scored it 115, 113, Gennady Golovkin. I did, but I wasn't. Even after the fight was over, I wasn't surprised. I even said, you know what? If it goes 115, 113 Canelo, I completely see that. Because I judged it just based on the experience I have. I judged it based on statistics. Gennady Golovkin was landing those jabs, but Canelo would still respond. So it wasn't like Canelo was getting tagged and then he stopped for the rest of the 2 minutes of the round, 3 minutes of the round, and he completely lost the round. But he responded. He responded with combinations. And one thing that I think really hurt Gennady Golovkin is that he didn't go to the body. And last year he was criticized for not going to the body. And Canelo went to the body both fights, to the point where I think that also gave him an advantage, because in the middle rounds, you can see that it started slowing down Triple G. Because, I mean, I'm sure, being in actually practicing MMA, body shots, they're no joke. If you know how to hit the body, most of the time that can be more effective than actually knocking you in the head. You knock the wind out of people, you hit him you get that liver shot. Canelo was working that body all night long, and in the middle rounds, you can even hear in the commentary, like, oh, you know what, Gennady's feeling that. And it came to the point where like Canelo would feint with the left hook to the top, or feint with the left hook to the body, and Gennady would with an instinct, he would put his hands down to block the body shot, and Canelo at the last second would raise it and hit him in the face. Because, he's like, well, I don't want to take it down here because I'm already hurt. And Canelo just put a lot of work in on that body. But Gennady was still coming back. In the later rounds, he came back.
Yeah.
And I don't know where he found the gas, but he had gas in the tank. And as I mentioned, he outlanded him in the jab category. And that's what I was focusing on. But like I said, even though I scored at 115, 113, at the end, I said, you know what? If it goes draw or 115, 113 Canelo, I completely understand that. Like this was way closer than the first fight. And people shouldn't be complaining about it and everything. But I'm sure, like you guys know, especially when big superstars fight, like Conor McGregor or Canelo Alvarez, Floyd Mayweather, you're always going to get a big subsection of casual fans who don't watch the sport, but they're attracted to the superstar who's in the bout.
Yeah.
And they don't, they're not, sorry to cut you off, but they're not as savvy about the sport as, us in our respective sports. So, they're the ones that are sharing on Twitter a majority of the time, and you hear all this narrative and stuff, but it happens. But it's good that people supporting the sports regardless. What were you saying?
No, I just wanted to jump in. I watched the fight, and I grew up watching boxing. I listening to Tyson fights on the radio when I was younger, and I watched up until the early 2000s, the Holyfield Tyson fights, and then I kind of really got into MMA hard and heavy, and boxing kind of faded for a while. So I'm not an expert on boxing, but I feel like I know the game pretty well, and other than not knowing all the up and coming guys, I catch all the good fights and stuff like that. I'm glad I heard your scorecard, because I had it 116, 112 for Triple G. I thought that watching the American broadcast, I thought the announcers were pretty biased towards Canelo. When you start talking, go ahead.
What's funny? Just to add to that, what's funny is that last year's broadcast, they were pretty biased towards Triple G. And this year's broadcast, they were kind of biased towards Canelo. So it was kind of a weird conundrum to notice as I was watching the broadcast. Like, can I ask you, did the Harold Letterman, who's the unofficial scorekeeper for HBO, during the broadcast, did his cards and how he scored each round, especially when they deferred to him on the broadcast, did he influence your decision at all to give that 116, 112 scorecard? Because Harold Letterman had that same exact scorecard.
No, actually, when I watch it, I was on the MMAcommunity.com forum, and I actually post my score before Letterman's come out. So, because I try not to be influenced by him. So it would be I'd be unhonest if I didn't say I was rooting for Triple G, especially after the last result. So there could have been a small bias there. But I had it after 10 rounds. I had it 5-5. So it wasn't as if and then I had Triple G winning the last two to make it 116, 112. You had it 115, 113. About 90% of the media I've seen had Triple G winning or a draw. I've seen one or two people had Canelo. I think the survey on the MMA community forum was about, not a ton of votes, but it was about 20 people voted either Triple G would have accepted a draw, and about 2 people had Canelo. would have accepted a draw. I mean, the majority of people thought it was a really close fight, a great fight. One of the better fights we've seen in a long time. At least the one that you had to pay money for. So I don't think anybody felt like they got jobbed out of their money this time. But and I think a lot of people had the emotional feeling that Triple G kind of got robbed in the previous fight. So in a close fight, I think a lot of people's hearts kind of wanted to go with him, and he's kind of the European outcast who had I guess his amateur record was something like 200-0. I mean, didn't he have some astronomical amount of wins in a row?
I think he had like 350 actually, something like that.
There you go. So I mean, he's had almost 400 bouts without a real loss, and it's kind of hard. I look at it as how much money did it cost him, and if he was the one promoted, and in boxing, you've always had a little bit of corruption. You have the fan bases. Canelo being the Mexican fighter, obviously has the big Latino backing for him. It's in Vegas, and it's a Golden Boy production. I feel like you almost start down 2 rounds when you kind of go into that atmosphere. Whereas if the fight would have taken place in Germany or Ukraine or some place like that, it might have been a different outcome. Maybe not necessarily right, because you might have gotten the favoritism in the other direction. But
right.
I think the most of the emotion and somebody like me is seeing somebody like Triple G, who seems to have put in so much time, and he finally got to the pinnacle of the sport, and then he really got robbed in the last fight. Had he won the last decision, I think people would have saw this decision and said, hey, it was a close fight. Let's do number 3 and find out who the best in the world is. But I think that's where a lot of the angle comes from people like me and a lot of people who are into combat sports. But like I said, you're the expert. But just kind of get emotional when there's a big fight and get to know some of these fighters.
No, I completely understand. I completely understand where you're coming from, and I think what a lot of it has to do with, especially not just taking into account the decision from last year, the draw outcome. And then, of course, a lot of people had Triple G winning, but it was a draw, and they felt that was robbery and all that stuff. But it didn't help that Canelo. This fight, remember, was supposed to happen in May of this year, the Cinco de Mayo holiday. But Canelo Alvarez got tested positive for clenbuterol, so it had to be canceled, and then he served like a 6-month suspension. That's why it got pushed to this past weekend. And I think that also affects people's emotions and how they view the fight, because obviously Triple G's tested a bunch of times, and he just seems like a humble guy and everything. He is. I've met him. I've interviewed him multiple times, and he has an endearing personality. So I understand people are drawn to him. So I think that also comes into account in terms of people's emotions following the decision, following the outcome. But when you're watching a fight, especially especially at these judges who all the judges, pretty much everything to the T in this secondary fight was researched and agreed upon between both promotions, Triple G's promotion and Golden Boy for Canelo. So it's not like somebody like got their own stuff over here and stuff over there. I understand it was in Vegas, and the Canelo's a Vegas fighter, and Golden Boy. I completely understand, but both promotions agreed on all 3 judges, on the gloves that were used. They all came to the same conclusion before the fight started to, okay, this is going to be as fair as possible, And even in the last 3 rounds, Triple G's trainer, Abel Sanchez, who's up here in Big Bear, California, even, I don't know if you guys, in the audio, the broadcast, he was telling Triple G in the corner, like in the last 2 or 3 rounds, we're losing this fight. I need you to go knock him out. I need you because Abel Sanchez even is like, you know what? This is way too close. And Abel Sanchez is a type of guy, throughout the last several months, he was talking all this smack on Canelo, saying that he ran the first fight. He needs to stand there and fight. He didn't give his fighter a fight. And Canelo came and he took the fight to Gennady Golovkin. All those criticism he got, I think he really took him to heart, and he took the fight to him. And when Abel Sanchez said that on the broadcast, Gennady, we're losing this fight. that's when I was like, okay, he knows, I mean, how of course, as a trainer, especially being with a fighter for a long time, you want to be able to tell them the truth to motivate them and get a win and stuff. But sometimes there's trainers that's just like, all right, you're doing well, keep going and get that jab going, get that left hook going, you know, stuff like that. But he told them, like, we're losing this fight. I need something from you. I need something from you. And then following the fight, they interviewed Abel Sanchez gave a couple interviews, and he was very graceful in his defeat. He said, you know what? I understand. He was like, that was a justified decision. And last year it was a completely different tone for him, where he said, no, they robbed us. Like, Gennady won all those cards. What that 118, 110 score was a complete disgrace, which it was. But, Abel Sanchez, the trainer of Gennady Golovkin, even said, he was just like, no, you know what? Like, Canelo came to fight. He proved me wrong. He came to fight. Congratulations. I hope we can do it a third time. He was graceful in defeat. And and he was the guy I was looking for in terms of what he had to say following the fight, because he's very vocal and he's a big student of the game. And he knows his boxing, and he's training one of the best boxers in the world. And when he said, you know what, I understand how it went that way. He was graceful in defeat. He's like, Canelo came to fight. And that was very, very telling for me. Very, very telling. So, that's why, like, people should be happy that we're gonna get a third fight here. I mean, this last fight was great.
So you don't mind a third fight, because it seems like I don't know. It seemed like from what I saw, it was 50-50 as far as people wanting to see have a third fight. Usually, best 2 out of 3 is what settles it. So I guess the third one has to happen to settle it. But
right.
you guys wouldn't mind seeing a third fight?
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it at all. These two guys, they're obviously elite. I think the only thing you have to worry about is Triple G's age. He's 36 or 37. I think he's 36. Canelo's 28. But I think Gennady Golovkin is one of those fighters, like a Floyd Mayweather, where in age it just seems like they get better, because they're in such peak physical shape, and they put in so much time into training and everything. So I'm not saying that Father Time isn't going to catch up to everybody. It catches up to everybody, especially fighters. But there's always those fighters that they're just so dedicated to the training, to the sport, that they can still perform at an elite level. So I don't, I think Triple G will still be an elite fighter if they fight the third time. But I wouldn't mind seeing it. My money's it's going to happen in May again, but who knows? Who knows? Canelo might do a voluntary decision, a voluntary matchup against somebody else to defend those world titles, and then they do the third for the trilogy. But I wouldn't mind it. I would love to see it.
Yeah, I would. I'd pay to watch that fight again, and I think that if Triple G wants that fight, then I think he deserves it, because that's the money fight for him. That's the fight he can make the most amount of money. As you said, he's getting old in his, up in age. I think he's 36. I'm not sure if he'll be 37 by the time May rolls around, but but like you said, combat sports is a bitch. When it catches up to you, it ends violently. And Canelo's a dangerous man to hit Father Time against. But with that said, that can happen at any level. It happened to everybody from Roy Jones Jr. to Mike Tyson, to everybody. Right. Eventually, you get lit up in this sport.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, people like, I know people are gonna, they're emotionally attached to each fighter and everything. So I get it. I've been there. I get it. But after covering this sport for the last few years, several years or whatever, as a member of the press, as a media member, you kind of have to check your ego at the door, check your fan, your fan side at the door.
Yeah.
So when you sit there, even if you're rooting for somebody in your heart, in your mind, you're supposed to be an unbiased opinion to a big extent. You're not supposed to stand up. I mean, I've been at fights where I see other media guys and stuff, like they'll stand up and they'll cheer and like,
oh my God,
what the hell are you, like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
you're never going to get a credential again. So there's a level of professionalism that we're supposed to uphold here, for these fights. I mean, I can't tell you how much money these floor seats, even though I get the credential, I mean, these are essentially like tickets that they're giving you. Of course, it's a give and take. You're providing coverage for them, and they're giving
Yeah.
you access into the event. But I mean, like, I've been at fights where like the floor seats that I have are, thousands of dollars and everything, and it's just like, wow, you sit there, you're just like, wow, but you have a job to do. You
Yeah.
give them coverage, you write your story, you go and do your podcast, your video interviews and everything. So there's a type of partnership.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of promotional companies who, before they give you the credential, or in the credential it says like, you can't show your fandom, like they don't cheer for one or the other fighter. It's unprofessional. Don't ask for
Yeah.
autographs, this and that. So
Mm.
I mean, Ed knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 'cause I'm laughing because I know you know the stories, and I'm pretty sure I've told you, Matt, a couple of them too. But a nice segue to because you mentioned Golden Boy a few times, and we talked about aging fighters and stuff. So it kind of went. I mean, the way it was handled, I thought was a little odd, but I know I was texting you about it last week, Daniel. So De La Hoya is jumping into MMA. The same week of Canelo Triple G, they had the press conference for Ortiz versus Liddell for the Golden Boy MMA.
Right.
Like what's the boxing side's opinion of De La Hoya jumping into the venture of MMA? Because I know people are already critical of it being Liddell and Ortiz and their age and stuff like that, but it's still gonna draw. I think let's be frank, it's gonna draw. But I just wanted
You
to
think
know
it's
what
actually
you
going to
guys.
draw? That's what I wanted to ask you. That's what I wanted to ask you, if it's actually going to draw. I mean, of course they're big legendary names, but I thought, well, the forum over here in LA like fits quite a few thousand people, like 10,000 plus, 12,000 or something. So I was like, well, I mean, can they draw? Can they draw all those people? And that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, of course they have the legendary names, but you think that they can draw?
I mean, it'll draw guys like me and Matt because we want to watch
Oh yeah,
fights regardless.
right, yeah.
I think that they're not selling the upper level. I looked into tickets. Ticket sales have been pretty terrible from the start. They're only selling the floor and the lower bowl, so that'll probably I think Staple or Forum actually holds somewhere closer to like 17,000.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a
From
lot.
when they do a full setup. But when I've gone to Glory events and stuff, there they use the lower bowl and the floor. I think it'll probably be somewhere around a 7,000 to 9,000 seat setup, kind of like a Bellator event when it's not a huge show. I don't know. I'm interested in it because I'm a fan of both fighters and I like to see some of my heroes fight one more time, guys that I got me into the sport. Even if it's ugly, I as long as they don't get maimed or seriously injured, I enjoy watching them compete. It's one of those things. I could probably call 10 of my friends who I couldn't get to go to any fight with me, and they would probably go to that fight just based off of their names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think in the grand scheme of it, I don't see them doing pay-per-view buys. I would be shocked if they broke 200,000. I mean, I think that's a high number in itself. UFC events right now are struggling to break the 300,000, and a lot of them are much lower than that. So, somebody asked me, who's actually a really good friend of Chuck Liddell, who is a mutual friend, and I know Golden Boy's looking for like 400 to 500,000 buys, and I think that's just straight up ridiculous.
Yeah, it's scary.
I don't know. I told him my response was, it depends on how the promotion goes. If they're able to get Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz on Sports Center a bunch of times, I don't know as much of the sports talk radio, but guys like Jim Rome and all those guys, those are the guys that kind of promoted, Tito and Chuck when they were coming up in the MMA game in the mid 2000s, and were really selling out arenas and big time names. So if they're able to get them on Sports Center for a couple weekends in a row, and maybe get them to show up to one of the college game days or something and do the picks and stuff like that, I think you can add 25, 50,000 buys pretty quick just by having Chuck Liddell's face on the screen. Probably more than Tito at this point, because Tito hasn't completely disappeared. But I know a lot of people, just if I told them Chuck Liddell was fighting tomorrow, they would definitely be interested in at least checking it out, and seeing him. Just like I was telling stories, I used to get 50 people to my house to watch Chuck Liddell fights. If I get 5 people to watch a Conor McGregor fight, it's crowd these days. It's just
Yeah.
they're just a whole nother level of it's what everybody got into the sport watching. So it's the same thing with Pacquiao and Mayweather talking about fighting again. Even though it's pretty much an irrelevant fight.
That was actually my next question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's the same kind of thing. Both of them are pretty much out of their prime. Obviously Mayweather's still undefeated, but it's the same thing. If you told somebody Pacquiao's fighting, you're going to get a lot more people to tune in than if you would have said Triple G was fighting like when he fought in Carson. Prior to after Canelo
Right.
tested positive, nobody was watching that fight. I mean, I watched it, and boxing fans watch it, but none of my casual friends were tuning into to HBO or Showtime, whatever that was on that night to watch that fight. So I don't know. I hope it draws well for the sake of the fighters because I think they make a big cut of the pay-per-view.
Yeah, and they still
buys.
got to add. They still have to build that card up too to make it more interesting.
I've heard rumors about the card, and I don't think that's going to be very impressive. I don't think there's a lot to draw from. Especially with all the big names and all the big organizations, and then a lot of the guys that are getting sucked up by bare knuckle boxing right now, that could have potentially helped fill out those cards. Brendan Ward, we just heard Brendan Ward and Johnny Hendricks signed to fight in the bare knuckle boxing.
Yeah.
Those are guys that hypothetically you could have put on the card and wouldn't have boosted it much, but would have helped at least at the gate by selling tickets.
So, Daniel, what's your take on the Mayweather Pacquiao 2 or Mayweather coming out of retirement again for another super fight?
I mean, honestly, when I was laughing my ass off when that news broke because Mayweather. You know what I thought about it? I mentioned it to my podcast co-host Michael Shepard about it. A couple weeks ago, I was just like, because Mayweather and McGregor. Mayweather and De La Hoya don't like each other.
Yeah,
they hate each other and like they compete against each other and then in the media and everything. And that's why last year Mayweather and McGregor, Mayweather and McGregor happened about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks before Canelo Triple G won.
That's right.
And I mean, and there's a lot of people who decided like, well, I don't want to buy both pay-per-views.
Yeah.
Which one do I want to see more? Well, I'm gonna buy Mayweather McGregor because it's this weekend and it's a huge fight and it's an intriguing matchup, even though you kind of know what was gonna happen.
Yeah.
But it's intriguing and they're the biggest stars in not just like in their respective sports, but they're like in pop culture as well. So Mayweather strategically did that last year. And I was telling my co-host, I was just like, I feel like he's gonna do something again. He's gonna do something to try to steal the limelight. Well, sure enough, Saturday morning, he released this video where him and Pacquiao meet up at some rave in Japan or something, and they're like, oh, let's do it again. And then Mayweather turns to the camera. He's just like, oh, I'm coming back in December. We're gonna do it. Like, what the hell? And I was just like, oh my god, this guy's they just wanted to steal the thunder on fight day from the biggest fight of the year in Canelo Triple G, the rematch.
Wow.
So I mean, I thought it was hilarious, but of course, De La Hoya, Golden Boy, probably hated it. They're like, oh, this guy again, But I know a lot of people didn't enjoy the first fight in 2015. I understand that, but I mean, like, I enjoyed it because I'm a boxing fan, and it was exactly how I expected. Mayweather fought like he always does. He fights everybody like that, and it was just. Pacquiao just couldn't catch him, just couldn't get him, and he just couldn't do it, and it's not like he's the first person that ever happened to. If it happens again, I mean, I'm going to watch it. I'm a boxing fan, just like you guys say, like, if it's MMA, we're going to watch it.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it. I'll watch it again, but honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it was just all smoke and mirrors. It was more to take, they're trying to feed, they're trying to see what the interest is in. I mean, they were talking about Mayweather McGregor too, and then they were going back and forth on social media. I mean, if the demand is there and if they can kind of measure it and then they can make another solid payday, well, of course they're going to do it.
Yeah.
But they're testing the waters here. So, they're time will tell, but I don't think they're going to fight again. I think it's just all smoke and mirrors and it's just a big circus, but I think it's hilarious.
Well, Mayweather's not going to fight any of the top young guys, right? I mean, that's pretty much we've determined that he's in it for the money, and he's not going to risk his record fighting somebody like I know Triple G's a little heavier than him, but hypothetically somebody like that or a Canelo.
No.
He fought Canelo already once, but he's not going to go through that again. And So with that said, other than some kind of off fight against a Mayweather or I'm sorry, a McGregor or a TJ Dillashaw in MMA or something like other than Pacquiao in boxing, who is there? Is there anybody else that would attract any kind of crowd for him to fight or make money for him, even if it didn't
in
sell?
terms of in terms of money, I mean Mayweather will draw on his own. I mean, like when he was fighting guys that didn't really have a name, but they were great boxers, undefeated, and they were like on a winning streak. He was still drawing 700, 800,000 pay-per-views, and analysts were calling that a failure for him because he was always breaking 1 million, 1.5 million. And 700, 800,000 buys is ridiculous. Like, that's a lot. But to somebody like Mayweather, who had such a high bar, it was a failing pay-per-view event because he was always breaking 1 million, 1.5, 2 million. So Mayweather would draw on his own, at least probably 400,000 or 500,000 at least. But in terms of, having that dance partner where they're going to actually draw somebody to, I mean, the only people out there is who he can, get a big buy rate is, of course, McGregor again, which if it happened once, it can happen again. Pacquiao or Canelo. Now, there's not to say that there's fighters in that division between 147 and 154 where he fights that won't give him a good fight. And they're young guys. They're world champions right now. Like guys there's a guy named Errol Spence. He's from Dallas, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
He's
a current IBF welterweight world title world champion. He's like 27-0, and he's probably the best welterweight in the world right now. I mean, there's other welterweights, Terrence Crawford, and those guys. They're right up there. But in my opinion, Errol Spence is probably the best welterweight in the world. So there's fights out there that are intriguing if you're a boxing fan and you know the sport. But Mayweather's not in the business anymore of fighting guys for competition. He's going to want you to have some type of name. That's why he would only come back for Pacquiao if the money's there, McGregor, or Canelo if Canelo goes down to like 155 or something like that. Mayweather's not in the business anymore of coming back to fight these young guys, especially since a lot of these young guys at welterweight within his weight classification are signed by his advisor, Al Heyman. So, if he comes back and he fights one of these young guys and he beats them, it's going to hurt his advisor's investment in that young guy, and the long-term investment is in these young guys who are world champions at the moment, who are still building their careers. So, he won't come back for any of the prime fighters right now in that weight classification. He'll just come back for Pacquiao, McGregor, or Canelo. And Canelo's a bit of a stretch because he fights at 160 now, and he can't make one. He can't go back down to 154 or 150 where they fought. They fought at 152 when they fought a couple years ago. And Canelo can't make that weight anymore. So I think your only viable options in terms of money is Pacquiao and McGregor.
Most of the people that weren't fans of Mayweather, I always enjoyed watching him because I was always a fan of the technical. I always told people that I was always told the key to boxing is not to get hit, not necessarily hitting your opponent, but not getting hit yourself. So the side of boxing is something that I've always enjoyed. Not always enjoyed paying a ton of money to watch it, but enjoyed watching it as a sport. He's coming to the end of his career, so he's probably at most only got a couple fights left. I've always told people that he can be kind of unexciting to the casual fan as long as he's undefeated, because he always can carry that with him and people can always watch to see him lose his first fight. If he were to fight somebody like Canelo and get knocked out and have that first loss, although he get paid, do you think it would hurt his reputation and kind of hurt his future earnings as a Hall of Famer and just a name value for the rest of his life, basically, if he were to retire getting knocked out as opposed to fighting some other bum for a third of the money and go 51-0?
I mean, yeah, of course, if he lost, it'd be a big thing. But honestly, I think of course, he still wants to remain undefeated. It's a big thing for him. I understand, he likes that record and he's proud of it and he's worked hard for it. I understand that. But, even if he lost now, if he got knocked out or something, I mean, the guy's like, essentially, he's been the highest paid athlete for the last several years, and he was the highest paid athlete this year on Forbes magazine, and he didn't even fight this year. But he's just like, it's just because he makes so much money,
Yeah.
especially from that McGregor fight. So I know he likes his undefeated record. I get it. I mean, I don't think he would risk it, but even if he does and he lost, even if he got knocked out, he's the type of guy like he would be graceful in defeat and be like, oh yeah, like Father Time caught up to me. But it's easy to say that when you got $700-800 million in the bank. So
Yeah.
But a loss would essentially end his run as a. Do you think he could take a loss and then still come back and sell as many pay-per-views?
I think it depends on the type of loss, and who the loss was against. I mean, of course, there's guys out there like even in the MMA world, you can take a loss, and then if you still you still grind it out, you can come back from it and sometimes become a bigger star. Like Canelo Alvarez, the only loss he's ever had is against Mayweather. Mayweather beat him when Canelo was 22 years old, and they sold like 2.4 million pay-per-view buys, and that was a big event. But everybody knew, like, you know what? Canelo's just not ready for somebody like Mayweather, and he wasn't. And that was a disappointing loss for Canelo. I mean, if you watch the Showtime All Access behind the scenes, you can see that he was very emotional following the loss. But look at now, Canelo after that fight, he's a bigger star than he's ever been after that fight. So I think for Mayweather, if he took a loss, I mean, I think it would hurt obviously his drawing power, but that's not to say that people still wouldn't want to watch him. He's always going to have some type of drawing power, and I think he knows that. I mean, I think he knows that he didn't really sell. People aren't buying his fights to see him knock out guys or beat guys. They're buying his fights because of his personality, and they want other guys to beat him up, to knock him out.
Yeah.
That's why they're buying it. And he knows that. How many times has he said that over the years in interviews and in all these like behind the scenes HBO 24/7s, Showtime All Access?
Yeah.
He says he's like, whether you pay to see me lose or you pay to see me win, you're paying to see me.
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
right. He's right.
He is.
So the same McGregor's probably like that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just gonna say, I mean, just to compare it to MMA, I mean, maybe McGregor's not so much like that because of all he actually draws like all of Ireland to Vegas when he come, or he'll probably draw them all, next month, or he draws them all to New York. I mean, he's in New York this week, and they're not even letting the general public in like they normally do for press conferences. It's media only. But back to the thing about wanting comparing it to MMA, even Dana White, as recently as whenever CM Punk fought last, he commented, he's like, well, when you can draw like CM Punk, then I'll put you on the main card, because
I remember that. I saw that quote.
Yeah. So even though he's 0-2 in MMA, they put him on the main card because people are tuning in to watch this WWE guy catch a real beating. You know what I mean?
But so they did terrible ratings on that show, so
they did.
I think Dana White might have got ahead of himself after the first.
But there's still people that watch. I mean, even with the low numbers. I mean, if you ask people, like when I was watching it, the people around me were like, I heard people say, I just want to watch him get his ass beat. I mean, Mike Jackson didn't help his own cause any by performing the way he did. He would have done himself a favor had he knocked out. I wrote mad articles about that, but so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but like he would have done himself a favor. That's why you're not hearing him to come up in the UFC anymore either. But anyway, that's besides the point.
Did you real quick? Did you catch on Twitter? I saw it before the show went on here that McGregor tweeted out that the press conference was open to the public, and I don't know if it actually is or if he's not. So he's just trying to start a riot then.
Yes.
Because he I didn't see how many I imagine you're gonna have.
Although I got an email from MSG before when I was making my way home. I didn't read it. It was from someone that works at MSG. So I don't know if they changed that because fans got mad or whatever. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'll probably verify it after, and I'll let you guys know. But you know what? One thing I wanted to ask you, Daniel, because Matt and I talked about it. I don't know if you went to anything for it or have talked about it with boxing guys. The Zone, DAZN with the Matchroom Boxing and the Boxing World Super Series. Obviously, they added Combate Americas and Bellator to their programming for here in the U.S. and Canada. So
Right.
how are boxing folks handling the streaming option? I mean, I never really hear much. I know I've talked to you about it in the past as far as like keeping up with technology. Boxing always kind of bothers me how it's like they do things a little old fashioned, and now you have
Right.
the streaming option. I feel like I don't know what's the opinion of you guys with the Zone coming into the U.S.
I mean, the people I talk to, and personally myself, I enjoy it. I think it's great. Like you said, all these streaming options and stuff. I mean, that's the way of the world now. Is all these Netflix, Hulu, HBO Go, HBO Now, all that stuff. Um, that's the way of the world now. Is streaming. That's why when there's a Showtime card, or even an HBO card, for the last probably year and a half, they'll show the undercard fights on YouTube.
Mm,
They'll stream them live on YouTube. So they're slowly getting into that. And I think for DAZN, I think it's great. I think it's great. They struck Eddie Hearn, who's the head of Matchroom Boxing. He struck a big deal. I forgot some big investment firm or some big investment guy over there in the UK, but it's a lot of money. And it gives fighters more platforms. And then ESPN released their ESPN Plus app, which is $4.99 a month, $5, and there's a lot of fights being streamed on there. And it's not they'll be streamed live, and then if you miss it, you can still go on the app and watch it because they're saved on there, which is great.
yeah,
So I think it's great. I think it's great for fans, casual fans, boxing fans, MMA fans. I think it's great. Um, and especially now, at least for boxing, there's a lot of television deals that have been signed in the last several weeks for Fox. Uh, the Zone has some and stuff like that. Showtime and stuff like that. I mean, HBO is kind of on the fence, and nobody kind of knows what their future is. But um, there's a lot of television contracts and a lot of streaming contracts that are coming into the fold. Even Facebook Watch is coming into the fold with Golden
yeah,
Boy. So,
yeah.
so
PFL uses them a lot.
yeah. So I think it's great. I like the Zone. I've talked to Eddie Hearn multiple times at events. He's been over here in LA multiple times. And I think it's great. I think he's a promoter's promoter. Like he knows the marketing, but he's a young guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4", and he's a young guy, so he knows how to adapt with the times. Um, but he knows how to market his company and his fighters. Um, but I think it's great, and I think you got to sink or swim. You got to adapt with the times, and streaming is the way of the world right now. And just because boxing has a lot of old fashioned people, which they still do,
Yeah,
um, you know, I think the tide's starting to turn. So they're just like, oh, you know what? Of course we want to do it this way, but everybody's going that way and we're falling behind. So we got to jump in here. So I think it's great. I think it's perfect for the sport.
I want to jump in real quick too, and as a fan of the kind of the heavyweights of all combat sports, it's kind of the first time in boxing in a while, it seems, that the heavyweight weight class kind of has some interest in it. Um, you got guys like Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury. I even heard Klitschko's talking about a possible comeback, and I know that there's a few other guys. Uh, what's your take on kind of where we're at with the heavyweights in the world of boxing?
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of heavyweight interest. I think it's the highest it's ever been. For the last, when the Klitschko brothers were in it for like 10 years, they were dominating
yeah,
everybody. They were dominating everybody, and so the heavyweight division didn't get a lot like too much interest, and it kind of died away because nobody can beat the Klitschko brothers. Like, oh, okay, you're fighting a Klitschko brother, well, you're gonna get knocked out, you're gonna lose again. So there was no interest. But I mean, like the Klitschko brothers were just that good, and the opposition they were fighting just couldn't pair up. But now, especially after Klitschko retired, Vladimir Klitschko, and especially how he lost to Anthony Joshua, which was like that was like a movie fight. I don't know if you caught it, but that was a fight of the year in 2017. Um, and it was in front of like 80,000 people at I think Wembley Stadium over there in the UK. Um, But Anthony Joshua obviously beat him, got his world titles, heavyweight titles, and then you got Deontay Wilder over here in America, is from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He has a WBC heavyweight world title, and then you got Tyson Fury, who just came back. He's been in a couple fights now, and now him and Wilder they're supposed to actually announce it officially this week. It's a rumor, probably tomorrow or Thursday, that they're supposed to fight. I think in November, I believe. Or maybe December. I forgot. They haven't really officially released details, but they're supposed to come over here in Vegas. But like you said, I think that the interest in the heavyweight division is it's the highest it's ever been since maybe the late 90s or when Tyson was still there, sometime in the 90s. And I think it's great. Anthony Joshua was like 28 years old, 27, 28 years old. Deontay Wilder's like 32, 31. Tyson Fury's like in his late 20s, 28, 29 or something. And then you got a guy like Luis Ortiz, who's from Cuba, who gave Wilder his hardest fight he's ever had, the previous fight. He's that guy's like 39, 40, but he could still mess people up. So there's a lot of interesting and intriguing matchups in the heavyweight division that there hasn't been in a long time. So and then this Saturday, just to give a quick plug, there's a pretty significant heavyweight championship fight this Saturday. Again, I think it's from Wembley. Anthony Joshua's fighting again, and he's putting his titles on the line against this Russian guy named Alexander Povetkin. The only loss that guy's ever had is against Vladimir Klitschko. Everybody else, he's like knocked out. So that's a pretty interesting matchup. So that's this Saturday if you can catch it.
Yeah, I see it's popped up on my feed a lot. Is that on where's that gonna, is that a pay-per-view or ESPN?
I think it's pay-per-view over there in the UK. Because Anthony Joshua's obviously a big draw over there.
Yeah.
Over here, you know what? I think it's on DAZN. Now that you mention it, I think
yeah, Josh was exclusive. Yeah, so you're right.
Yeah, he's Matchroom. So, I think if you have the DAZN app, you can stream it on there this Saturday, and if you have the time, that should be a pretty interesting fight. And especially because Joshua draws so many people to these big stadiums. It seems like a pretty crazy atmosphere. So, no, like going back to his question, I think the heavyweight division is great right now, and I hope it just keeps going, and eventually these like guys like Wilder and Joshua fight and come head to head, and it just keeps going up from there.
Do you when you got into the sport, who are some of the who's your, if you had to say who your favorite fighter was, or maybe your favorite fight coming up that really locked you into the sport? Can you get it down to one or two names or a fight or two?
I mean, man, I was a big Chavez fan. I mean, I'm Mexican American, so Julio Cesar Chavez.
I was gonna say that's a default for us.
So that's a default for if you're Mexican. In my household, it was he was huge. I was a Pernell Whitaker fan. If you know Pernell Whitaker, look him up. But he's a very significant fighter. Sweet Pea, exactly.
Yep.
And then going back to like, the 80s and stuff like that. I like Roberto Duran a lot. I was a big fan of him. And then you got Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard. But I was always a Duran fan. I've always liked him. But yeah, like Chavez, Pernell Whitaker, and then De La Hoya came into the fold, and I was a fan of De La Hoya, even though some people hated him. But I was cool with him.
Same here.
So I was cool with him. I appreciated him, and especially him being an Olympian gold medalist and a Mexican American, and then he was doing his thing. I was cool with it. So, and in terms of fights, I mean, man, let's see. I mean, I watched a lot of Tyson fights. I even watch him back sometimes, like on YouTube and all that stuff, and all the fights he's ever had, because they're just insane. But you watch the significant fights, not Mayweather, De La Hoya, Mosley. I think they fought twice. You got Felix Trinidad in there. I think he fought Mosley too. And Felix Trinidad, was great too, but then he just kind of disappeared after a while. Then you had Fernando Vargas and De La Hoya when they fought. I think they fought in 2002. That was a big moment for Mexicans because two Mexicans going at it. that was a big fight. I remember there was a ton of people at my house
Yeah.
watching that fight. So that was a big event. Um,
I
so
remember De La Hoya did that interview. I forget who he did it with. It might have been Real Sports or something. When he talks about when he faced Chavez and how it kind of damaged his fan base when he won over Julio Cesar Chavez, and how he just talked about how he kind of regrets even doing that fight because he was like it was almost like he shot himself in the foot by taking that fight and winning.
it did, and it did. It was like a double-edged sword because Chavez was so endeared by not just Mexico, but a
Yeah,
lot in the United States too. He was like a god.
yeah,
He was
yeah,
like a god. He really was. Um, and they thought, okay, put him against the young lion, against the old lion. De La Hoya's Mexican and stuff. But I think what happened was
yeah,
that Chavez was just so endeared. His people were just so behind him that even though De La Hoya beat him,
yeah.
uh, it didn't translate. He didn't get his fans to go to his, like, people were just like, man, forget that. Like,
Yeah.
you beat my guy, so it
Yeah.
was tough for him. It was a double-edged sword.
You
Yeah.
know why I'm laughing? I think I might have told you this story, Daniel, but Matt hasn't heard it. I remember getting into a heated argument about that fight and not realizing that I was getting upset because of that endearment that I had for Chavez. That when someone was talking about it, it was some dude I grew up with. But I remember getting so mad and then catching myself. I'm like, wait a minute, man! It's just it was just a sport. Why am I getting so upset over this? But
Yeah,
it was a
exactly.
pretty big deal for us hardcore Chavez fans back then.
Well,
No.
it was been a while, but if I remember right, didn't De La Hoya whooped his ass pretty good, and it wasn't it like it stopped in like
Whoa,
the
whoa,
sixth
whoa! Take
round.
it easy, Matt. No.
No. But if I remember right, it was like wasn't it like a sixth round stoppage or
I think, yeah, I believe
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
But
But
it goes to what you were saying, like I'm a big Fedor fan. Fedor tapping out to Verdun, I'll pass the torch. Bigfoot Silva can go F himself. You know what I mean? It's not like he lost, Chavez didn't lose a close decision. He got his ass whooped. So if you're a fan of Chavez, I can see you kind of looking at De La Hoya and not wanting to, and it being hard to accept passing the torch and moving in that direction as far as changing your allegiance to who you're rooting for. Like I said, whereas I became a Verdun fan, even though he beat my guy, I never rooted for Bigfoot Silva in a fight after he beat Fedor. So it's just kind of the way it is. But man, this has been awesome. We talk about being a show that kind of talks about all
Yeah.
combat sports, and obviously we lean MMA and we try to talk a little glory and when boxing matches come up. But it's been awesome having
Some jujitsu.
we,
Yeah.
we've had jujitsu, we've had submission grapplers, we've had them on the show, and we've talked actually quite a bit about that. But this is the first time we've had a boxing analyst and expert on, and
One of
um,
the best.
yeah, and it's for me it's been cool because like I
Yeah.
said, it's boxing's what got me into the combat sport. The first fight I ever went to was Shane Mosley against Wilfredo Rivera
oh wow,
at Pachanga,
oh wow,
and actually ran
Temecula. Yeah,
at Temecula and actually ran into my old MMA instructor Mark Hall at that time, and he was handing out flyers for his first event. So, and Ed knows, but I've been to over 200 live events now, so that kind of kick-started my whole the whole world of getting to watch combat sports live and seeing De La Hoya actually not De La Hoya, Mosley finished Rivera in the 10th round, final round with a knockout, and
yeah.
actually was one of the better fights of the year that year. And ever since then, I kind of became a Mosley fanboy, and then they when obviously everybody who had Sony PlayStation played the Knockout Kings and Fight
Knockout
Night
King there.
and
Knockout
Fight Night and
Kings.
stuff like
That
that.
game
So
was awesome.
that's why you were
Yeah.
naming off all those guys, and I was just waiting for Ike Corte. I was going,
Yeah.
well, pretty soon we're gonna have the entire Knockout Kings roster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on, man, and really talking about another sport that I love and enjoy watching, and really happy to see it. It never really disappeared, but it kind of faded away as MMA really kind of hit the peak. But it's great to see it back and getting good pay-per-view buys and getting some character back in the sport, and whether it's the heavyweights or kind of the classic divisions that have always kind of ran boxing in the middleweight divisions over the last 30 years or so. It's great to see that back and be able to talk about that and and it means something, not just be talking about fights that don't mean anything and nobody's interested in. It's
Yeah.
great to see that back.
Daniel, let folks know about where they can follow the new podcast, your stories. Where do we follow your hot takes?
Sure. So like I said, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. I know you guys have been doing this show for a while. And I know you guys talk mostly MMA, but I mean, Ed knows, of course, now, and you both know now that, when you need a boxing guy, you can call me. And then, even if you want to change it up a little bit, I have a lot of contacts so I can get on your show in terms of boxing. So, but yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, at Danny Z, _boxing, on Twitter. You can follow us on our podcast. We just actually started it within the last couple of weeks. There's 2 episodes. Second episode just dropped yesterday where we review Canelo Triple G, not just that fight, but the entire card. Co-main event, the television swing belt, and all that stuff. We talk about Friday's fight on ESPN from Fresno for the 140-pound world title. And then we talked Joshua Povetkin this Saturday. So that episode just dropped, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the big platforms like that. And you can follow that podcast on Twitter and Instagram at The Last Round 12, The Last Round 1-2. And then my co-host on that is Michael Shepard. He's from England, who now is planted over here in Southern California. So it's an English guy and a Mexican American guy doing a podcast on boxing. So, if, like I said, I told Ed before, if we ever need like some type of MMA guy or anything, if McGregor comes back and he wants to fight Canelo or somebody, or maybe another Mayweather, then we'll reach out. And, I'm sure there'll be a time when we need an MMA expert, or even if you guys just want to talk boxing, and you guys are in the area, you're more than welcome to come. We do it out of a studio and everything. So, we're trying to keep it as professional as possible and then attract some good fans. So, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. And then, like I said, when you guys need a boxing guy, you know where to find me.
Word.
Awesome. And as usual, fans can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and at Carbeerzol on Instagram. We also have some merchandise available at teespring.com, TEESPRING.com. You can search it for Coast. It's Coast-to-Coast Combat with dashes in between each word. Or you can see our link on Twitter. And if you're interested in any of the merchandise, let me know. If you're interested in any other kind of merchandise, there's a lot available to us. So I'd be happy to put something together if anybody is willing to represent the podcast and support us. So with that said, we're still waiting. Hopefully next week I'll have a main event for my damn birthday in New York coming up for UFC 230.
Well, by Thursday you'll sure have it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We're going to find out there's Mayweather Pacquiao 2 before I find out who's fighting in 5 weeks in Madison Square Garden. So hopefully we'll have that to talk about in the press conference, and we'll see where we're at in any other announcements in the world of boxing or MMA. Good talking to you guys.
All right. Hey, Daniel.
Yeah.
When are you going to stop telling me how to live my life?
I've been telling that to you for years, man. You still haven't listened to me.
we got a regular Billy Joel over here. All
right, guys. Thanks, man. It was a good time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Uh-huh.